Today we're joined by
Sure.
Michael Sweet, lead singer, songwriter, guitar player for the band Stryper, who ascended to prominence in the 1980s with the Billboard Top 40 charting signals like Calling on You, Honestly, Always There for You. And your latest project, right, is The Final Battle, marks the 14th studio album. And then, of course, in addition to that, I saw on your website the moniker hardest working musician today. And man, it's so true. I love your stuff. The solo albums, the collaborations, everybody from Boston to Sweet Lynch and Iconic, so much great music. And also, for those who haven't got the book, I'll put a plug in. Got to get this book. Great book, honestly, Michael, that you wrote a while back, and just love the stories and love the story of your life and the story of Stryper. So, anyways, we're so glad to have you on today. And as we were talking, you're in the kind of the midst of this tour, the Final Battle tour. You're at home right now, but where are you guys getting ready to play?
Yeah, I'm home right now. We're going to head out to Nashville next week and go through some gear details, and then we're going to fly to Texas. We've got some shows in Texas, and then we do Monsters of Rock cruise. We'll be gone and be a part of that for, like 5 days.
Yeah.
And then once we get home, we have a day off, and we go to Nashville again, and we hit the ground running, starting the official Stryper ground run. So I'm going to be away from home for about 6 weeks, and I don't look forward to that ever. I like being home. I like waking up in my own bed and getting my own coffee mug, and pouring my own cup of coffee, and there's something to be said for that. Yeah. Traveling these days is becoming less and less enjoyable for me in terms of the travel part of things. I love seeing people and connecting with people. That's why I do what I do. But it's just the grunt work of traveling, suitcases at 5 a.m. in the airports, and that whole thing. I don't know, man. I'm trying to love it, and I can't.
How has the concert scene post-COVID, how has that kind of, is it back? Are crowds back with your shows, or what's the experience out there?
They're back, but it's not back to the same. It's not as it once was. It's definitely a different world. You can feel it all around. More so, crowds, like we just did a 3-show run, and the crowds were fantastic. We had great numbers. So I would say that was the same if you had gone back in time 3 or 4 years. Really good turnouts. But what's not the same is expensive touring.
Yeah.
Buses are sometimes double in price.
Yeah.
What they were 3 years ago. The cost of fuel, we all know that. I don't need to explain that. And then, guarantees, oddly enough, have come down. So your expenses have gone way up, but your guarantee has come way down. So there's not as much money to cover much higher expenses.
Yeah.
And that makes it difficult to tour for some bands, actually impossible to tour for some bands. We're very blessed in the sense that we have sponsorship. We're very, very grateful for those who help us, meet our needs and cover our expenses before the tour starts.
Yeah.
God's really blessed us. And I don't know why. I have no explanation other than God has really blessed us. And we're grateful for that. Really grateful, because we'd be one of those bands where we just wouldn't be able to afford to tour.
Yeah. Well, we're out here, those of us who come to the shows and follow your music, we're grateful for the opportunity to see you. And I was actually out in LA, I think in 2017, and when you guys played the Whiskey, I know you played a few times out there, but what a great show. And I brought my 14-year-old daughter, and we were on East Coast time. So we're, West Coast, and it's 3:00 in the morning by the time it's over. But she loved the show. They loved the show. And to watch you guys in such an iconic, type of place was just amazing. So we're very appreciative that you're out there and still playing and still sharing the good news, man, of Christ in what you guys do.
Absolutely. And that's, at the end of the day, and I know this probably may sound cliche, and probably is to some degree, because a lot of people say this, but I'm going to say it, and it really comes from the heart, and I mean every word of it, every ounce of it. What makes it all worth it is when you hear a story, you read a story, you meet a story in person, somebody whose life has been touched to the degree that they've turned their lives around. They were suicidal, or they were near death, or alcoholism, drugs, what have you. Something had gotten the best of them, and they were just ready to check out. And because of Stryper, the music, a song, an album, a show, they turned their lives around and are thriving now in the world and doing incredible things. That's what makes it worth it.
Absolutely.
And that's why we're here. And that's what makes us different from any other band.
Yeah.
We're not just a rock band out there for the fame and the fortune, getting on stage after stage and to hear everybody tell us how great we are and all that nonsense. That's just meaningless stuff that's here and gone. But what is for eternity and what lasts and what is forever is when you have an effect on people's lives, and you help them, you inspire them. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I was getting ready for this interview today, and I remembered a story. I'm one of those kids that heard you when I was 14 and grew up in a Christian home. And, my mom and dad, they were concerned about all the negative kind of stuff in music. So they were looking for alternatives. And we had a local Christian rock show, actually Final Flight, where I heard you guys on a Friday night, and it sounded like everything. It sounded like Crew. It sounded like all those bands that we weren't allowed to listen to. And went to the store next day, bought the album. And so we just started, man, it was such an influence on our lives. I remember seeing you guys, I think it was the first tour. You played here in Columbus, Ohio, and we couldn't hear for 2 days because we were right next to the speaker as you guys were playing. But it was an amazing, amazing show. So I was thinking about that, and I had remembered a story of a friend, and I called and said, I'll make sure I get the facts straight on this. But we had a friend back in the 80s, and this guy was on an LSD trip and walked inside, put your album on, and the lyrics, he said, it was as if God was speaking to him. That was a pivotal moment where he changed his life around, gave his life to Christ. And I think, kind of growing up in that, there was an anointing on what you guys did. And the music, unbelievable. But the anointing that was on Stryper and what you guys did was so powerful in that season, where everything was so dark, and here God was moving.
For sure. I mean, and we were a part of that. I think that's what makes us a little different is, before we gave our lives to Christ and we devoted the band to God, we were playing the clubs with Motley Crue and playing the clubs with, Quiet Riot, and playing the clubs with Rat and all these bands. Yeah. And we were under a different name, Rock's Regime, but we were doing that. And then we turned things around and took a different path. And I think that's what makes us very unique is the kids were still able to relate to us because they might have remembered us for who we were. Yeah. And we had the sound and the look, and they could relate to that. But at the same time, we had a completely different message. Yeah. And they were probably hearing the message thinking to themselves, gosh, what's going on here? This is really different. But it worked, and it really touched a lot of lives and a lot of hearts. And, we got out of that scene early on, thank God, because so many of our peers are gone. They're dead. Yeah. They're not here anymore. Or if they are here, they're not doing what they love to do any longer, or they're doing it at a completely different level. Mm-hmm. And God's really blessed this band to be able to continue on and thrive in a crazy world and keep doing what we're called to do and put on earth to do.
Yeah. I there's such an interesting time right now with the Asbury revival, things like that are happening where 50,000 people are, coming to events like that. God seems to be moving so powerfully. And then the Jesus Revolution movie, have you seen that? Did you get a chance to see that movie?
I have not seen that yet. No, believe it or
Fantastic.
not.
Yeah.
Yes, haven't had the chance. And you're referring to the one primarily about Chuck Smith, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes, which I
Yeah.
know you guys were involved early on with Chuck Smith, weren't you? Or one of his affiliate churches? One of the
We were involved with Calvary Chapel of West Covina, which was Raul Reese's church, who sat under Chuck Smith.
Yeah.
We met Chuck. Chuck prayed over us and performed at Costa Mesa Calvary Chapel. But we never sat under Chuck Smith in a direct way. But still, that's where we come from. Those are our roots for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an amazing story. And I almost feel like it's a prophetic type moment to where we're due, I think, in our culture for another powerful move of the Spirit in emerging generations. And, and not just churchy, but really to invade the culture with authenticity in people's giftings, in the arts, in music. And so when I think about that, I think we're in that time. The third movie that I think is really kind of interesting and important was the one you were a part of 2 years ago, the Jesus music, which kind of, for a little bit tells your guys' story at the beginning of your input into that contemporary Christian music story, if you will. And so,
and I definitely saw that. I had like a private screening with the guys that made the movie. But that was fun, man. And my hope is always what bums me out in the Christian movie world is so often my gripe, if I have a gripe, is they don't have the budgets that a lot of these other movies have.
Yeah,
and a lot of times, often you see it. Mm-hmm. And you feel that you can as a viewer, as I'm watching the movie, you can kind of sense that it's a lower budget and they didn't have the money to do what they wanted to do, and it's always kind of sad to see. And with most, not all, but most Christian movies, and it's hard to believe because the greatest stories ever told are in the Bible. So it's like you can make the best movies ever if you had the big production.
Yeah.
But it's maybe someday that'll happen, and maybe we're getting there slowly but surely.
Yeah. Well, I think so, and I think God's definitely at work. And so, I was again kind of thinking about you guys because I think your story is important. Just kind of having watched it over the years is, growing up we had groups we could listen to, and then you guys did more than provide an alternative. I feel like you kind of blazed a trail that created this desire to not just think about music or art or our relationship with God as kind of, we certainly come out of the world. We're also called to go. And thinking back to my teenage years, it was such a powerful message when I saw you guys saying, hey, we're going into the world. We're going to spread the light. We're not hunkering down. We're not backing off. We're going to spread the love of Christ. And I think that's an amazing trailblazing type of template, if you will, that I'm hopeful in generations as I pastor younger generations, that we want to think about it that way. It's not just we're hiding out. Let's go take this message of Christ and see the miracles and see the salvations and see what God did, what God can do. So thank you for that. I mean,
sure.
Well,
I'll tell you, it's it takes a certain personality to be able to do that and to deal with that. And I think God knew what he was doing when he chose the four of us.
Yeah.
My personality, speaking for myself, is not to stop.
Yeah.
If I get beat down, I get back up again.
Yeah.
And it's just the way I'm built.
Yep.
And I stay focused on the prize and the plan, and I don't wander away from that or off from that. And it's been difficult. I'm not going to lie. I mean, we get beat up. It's funny, we get called every name in the book in terms of being wimpy and this and that. And I think about it, and I think I'd like to see some of these other rock bands do what we've done.
Yep.
I'd love to see it. And see how long they last.
Oh yeah.
Because it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's been difficult. We've gone and played festivals where we've been booed and had things thrown at us, and it went to Jakarta and played to a festival, a giant crowd of primarily Muslim folks, and we're singing about God. I mean, we've done a lot of interesting things, and
Yeah.
stuff that people might not think of or know of. And when I look back on it and think about it, I think, wow, that was scary. Good thing we made it out of that.
Yeah.
But we did.
Yeah.
And in the moment, we didn't care. It was like, whatever, let's go do it. And that's kind of how we're built.
Yeah. It's amazing. And I think the story, and not just the 80s, but now, that you guys are putting out music. And by the way, I heard the new Lynch. I can't remember the song.
Sweet and Lynch. It's called "You'll Never Be Alone."
Amazing.
It's more of a throwback, a little bit of a '70s throwback with the guitar riff, a little more Zeppelin-y.
Mm-hmm.
And then the music kicks in. It takes you into the '80s a little bit more.
Yeah.
We've got a new song coming out called "Miracle." It's coming out next Monday. And it's more like 80s Dawkins meets Stryper kind of thing. And really cool, really excited about this. I think this is a really great record. And George did a fantastic job. He's playing amazingly well. And it's going to be awesome.
Well, I was so excited. I played back in the 80s. And, we had Christian rock band and all of that. George was my guitar guy. You were my vocal guy. And so when I heard, you guys were coming together, I'm like, man, this is amazing. I've loved every one of the records. And if this had been released in 1985 or 86, forget it, man. It was, you guys are iconic and amazing. But the chemistry is so cool, I think, with your music.
It is. It is. It's interesting because, everybody knows, or everyone, I think, at least knows that George is a self-proclaimed atheist and I'm a Christian. And polar opposites, and you think, how does that work? Oddly enough, it works really well.
Yeah,
it works really well because I do the lyrics and the vocals, he does the guitar playing and the music, and it just works out. Yeah. I love that. And George is one of my all-time favorite players.
Yeah.
And, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think if these albums had been released in the 80s, they probably would have done very well.
Oh, yeah.
I think people would have really liked them,
Yeah, and I'm sure they're doing well now. I mean, I think the musicianship. Do you play guitar at all on the Sweet Lynch stuff?
I play guitar on the first two albums. On this album, I did not play any guitar. I did write a few songs musically that got submitted that made it on the album because we were shy some music. Going more for that old school Dawkins sound. So Heart and Sacrifice and the second track on the album, I'm trying to think of the name of it. And they got more of that Dawkins style. Yeah. But no, I didn't play guitar. I just sang, man. And my job was to lyrics, melodies, and sing. And George's was music and play.
Yeah. Well, it's a great combo. And by the way, I love your playing. And
thank you, man. I
think you're an amazing player.
I'm a simplified player. I don't do crazy stuff. I'm not a shredder per se. I'm just I'm one of those guys that guitar has always been my first instrument and my first love musically. And I'm one of those guys that writes solos like a singer.
Yeah.
Like I do it section by section. I'll take like a 4-bar section and write that segment.
Yeah.
And it's always, I try to write solos in terms of something that you could sing along to almost.
Yeah, very lyrical. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just more my style of soloing.
Yeah.
It's different. Again, it's nothing impressive, but hopefully you remember what I do.
Oh, I think it's amazing. Yeah.
And hopefully it works.
Yeah. Yeah. What you, real quick, is for your influences on guitar, who are your guys? I mean, who influenced you most?
My biggest influences growing up, the first big influence that made me air guitar and jump on my bed pretending to play guitar was Chuck Berry.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Chuck Berry. I loved Chuck Berry growing up. My grandmother used to play, turn on the TV, and I'd watch Chuck Berry, and I'd be like, wow, always fascinated. Then as I got older, I got into guys a little older, like a
yeah,
12-year-old. I got into guys like John Fogerty.
yeah,
Because I loved how he wrote a hook and wrote these incredible riffs that were so simple, but they drew you in and kept you. And then as I got older, a teenager, I really started getting into guys like Michael Schenker.
yeah. Great player.
Michael's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
Randy Rhoads.
yeah,
A guy by the name of John Sykes,
yeah,
who's another favorite of mine. Then I of course, got into Eddie Van Halen.
yeah, yeah.
And I would probably say Michael, John, Randy, and Eddie are probably my 4 go-tos. And then I'd put fifth on that. I heard after the fact, George. George is right up there with all of us. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, those are amazing guys. And, one of the things I love about your playing too is that signature tone. And I've read many an article trying to figure out, what you have kind of done over the years to create that. It's an amazing, unique, but such a powerful tone. And of course, the 80s, tone's everything and still is today. But, the whole tone chasing thing was a huge thing, man.
So true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So true. I tell you, my thing, if I could give anyone advice out there in terms of tone, the go-to theory of guitar, rock guitar, is driving an amp with something.
Yeah.
And it's always an overdrive or a distortion unit. And that's what everyone does. And that's great. But the thing about that, I learned at a very early age when I was like, 15, 16 years old. The thing about that is you can't really control it. In other words, you got a couple knobs and you get more or less of those knobs.
Yeah.
But if you take an EQ, a parametric or a graphic, and you use that as your pre-drive, your preamp, you can manipulate the distortion a lot more by boosting and cutting frequencies. And that's how I discovered my tone, and that boosting a lot of mid frequencies, pulling out high frequencies, pulling out low frequencies.
Yeah, because it's huge sustain, but it's still clean.
Yeah, it really is a very tight, clean. Yeah. And I'll say this, you got to get used to playing it.
Yeah.
It's hard to play because a lot of gain that isn't tight and clean kind of masks and hides your mistakes.
Yeah, yeah.
When you have a real clean sound, there's no hiding. It's like you hear every little thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to get it right. No, man, that's amazing. That's amazing stuff. Well, I love, again, the new album, Final Battle, and of course, which I guess is new last year. That's the current tour, right? Is there another Stryper album in the works? Or
we have an acoustic album that's coming out this year.
Very cool.
Been in the can for a couple of years.
Yeah.
We're really excited about that.
Yeah.
I have an inspirational album.
Oh, very good.
That has also been in the can for a couple of years that we're planning on releasing.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah.
And then I've got the Sweet and Lynch album coming out in May. And then later in the year, I've got another album coming out with Alessandro Del Vecchio. He and I did a project. I'm singing and melodies and lyrics and whatnot again. And it's very journey-ish.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
So it's totally different. It's not a metal album at all. And that's really exciting. I'm super excited for people to hear that one.
Yeah. As far as and I think I read something that you posted about the difficulty of touring some of these bands, and I would love to see Sweet Lynch. And you indicated maybe there would be a show somewhere, maybe in Vegas or somewhere, residency type thing, or maybe limited. Is that a possibility, or what's? I lives in Vegas, so I got a place to stay. If you guys,
that's a strong possibility. Yeah. Again, it always comes down to are you in the red or are you in the black?
Yeah.
If you budget everything out, and you put it all on a piece of paper, and then you look at the very last line and you see that you're 25, 30,000 in the hole,
Yeah.
and you can't afford to do it, then obviously it means it's not going to work.
Yeah.
But if George and I can figure out a way to make it work financially and logistically, and we could schedule it in, and I thought it'd be cool. We do a residency, maybe one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast.
That'd be great, man. Well,
we go into a club for a week. We play every night.
Yep.
We do 6 or 7 shows. People get to hear these songs finally.
Oh yeah, live.
It'd be really cool.
Be amazing, man. Well, I'm hoping.
Yeah, or we can make Eddie Trunk really mad and do it all to tracks.
Yeah, I saw that. Do you use tracks?
Stryper does use some tracks, and I've talked to Eddie about this, and I've always been upfront about it. We use tracks to enhance certain songs. So what I mean by that, take a song like Yahweh, for example. It's got a ginormous choir that starts the song and in the chorus. Yo, it sounds like a 100-man choir. You can't pull that off with 2 voices or 3 voices. It's literally going to sound really silly. So we use some tracks on that song. But, we keep tracks very limited and only for enhancement. There's no lead vocals at our track, not one note. There's no guitar solos at our track, not one note. So it's all us playing live. Oz sings, Perry sings, I sing, all live vocals going on stage. That's the other thing. When we're singing with these vocals, a lot of bands have track vocals and they're not singing with the vocals. And I don't say all, I say a lot. And that's because some of the guys can't sing. They don't sing a note.
Well, that's so true. And you and Sammy Hagar. You and Sammy Hagar can still hit the notes, man. I mean,
I can still hit some of the notes. I can't hit them all, but I choose my battles. Sometimes I can't hit any high notes live. But the point is, I think tracks are fine if they're used to enhance and not. You don't rely on them too much. If you're deceiving the crowd, that's when it becomes wrong. But it seems like some people are just against tracks completely. And, Queen was using tracks to pull out Bohemian Rhapsody back in the 70s.
Yeah, you had to. They had to.
It would have sounded like a joke if they didn't use those tracks.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Imagine one guy, I see a little, one guy up there doing that. And you got this giant choir on the album. People would hear it and say, that sounds weird.
But it's just a different day now. I mean, even in our church here, our worship, we utilize tracks, but very limited. It's you're playing a track and we're up there lip syncing. I mean, it just fills in to make it fuller. And so, I think it's great, man.
I do think it's ridiculous. I will go on record saying it's ridiculous when you're a band and your tracks get shipped to, Chile, South America instead of, Mexico, and you can't perform because your tracks are in another country. I will say that's a little ridiculous. That's going a little far. We Stryper all the time. We do shows with tracks and we do shows without tracks.
Well,
all the time.
Yeah, man. I've always appreciated that. You guys play, man. Anytime we have, seen you, it's 100%.
Anytime anybody wants to take the Stryper challenge, let's go. Let's do it. We'll perform live for anyone, anywhere, doing all the harmonies in performing right there in front of everybody, and they can see there's no tracks. We could do it with or without tracks, but we only use tracks for certain songs to enhance them, to make them sound more, more like the album and more full.
No, I think it's amazing. One last question I have for you, and this is kind of tying back into the spiritual influence type of thing. Obviously, you guys have had a great spiritual influence through your message and your songs and the concerts and those of us out here who grew up with it and continue to follow it. I've always been curious, and I love what you said about George. I love that you collaborate with people on the basis of relationship and connection, because I think that's the most powerful form of evangelism,
Yeah.
sharing the good
It
news, is that we love people and connect with people. And what's your experience been kind of behind the scenes over the years as far as seeing Christ work just through that connection of being, fellow musicians, fellow artists, those types of things? And do you have a story, or maybe not to name names, but something that's kind of interesting as to how Christ has used Stryper in connections and relationships?
Well, I mean, I think there's so many stories, but one in particular, most recently, was the King Diamond story. We went over to Mexico to perform, and our dressing room was right next to King Diamond's dressing room. It was merciful fate, but King Diamond, Kim. And I said to myself, I got to meet him. And everybody knows he's a Satanist. And I met him and we talked, and it was just a nice, wonderful, beautiful conversation, short and sweet. We talked about the weather, and he was pleasant, and I was pleasant, I hope. And we took photos together and whatnot. And it's funny because I posted that, and I had a lot of negative feedback.
Yeah.
And he had some negative feedback too. People telling him, "Oh gosh, why are you taking a photo with this clown?" And people telling me, "Why are you taking a photo with that clown?" And it's really sad. What I saw a lot more often than not was people saying, "Hey, did you witness to him?
Yeah.
Did you share the gospel with them?"
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, in a 5-minute conversation backstage at a show.
Yeah.
I mean, but this is the mentality.
Completely.
People forget that, as you just said, the strongest witness is you.
Yes.
Your time, your love, your grace, more than words.
Yes.
And that's what's going to leave an impression. And when that door opens to share words and speak words, that'll happen.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I was just thinking about that, and I thought, man, the longevity that you guys have had in the music industry has been so powerful, not only, I think, externally, but I thought it's got to have been so powerful behind the scenes. And like you said, it's, living the life, man. And, and being authentic. We're not perfect. We've all got our stuff, but that's why we need grace. That's why we need Jesus. And, just
so true,
guys, man. Appreciative of you guys for all of it.
Yeah, man. I hope that those stories, and there's many of them over the years, over almost 40 years, I hope that they've made their mark. I think they have. And it's really cool because, like, Kim's wife, King, his wife reached out to me on Facebook and said, "Oh, I wanted to meet you guys." And you just kind of see the seed being planted and growing and spreading, and it's really neat. And I think it's cool, and to still have that opportunity time and time again in 2023, we're still here doing it, is really a blessing.
Yeah, amen. Well, thank you so much, man. We're looking forward to you coming to Versailles here in Ohio. I think it's May 12th out at the BMW.
That sounds right.
It's a cool venue. I mean, it's a track, right? And
it's awesome, and we can't wait. And hopefully, it's a great show.
Yeah,
it's always a roll of the dice. You think this is going to be a great show, and then you do the show, and it's like, that wasn't as good as we expected because of technical mishaps or whatnot. But I hope it's a great show.
Yeah, man, it's going to be great. We're going to be there, and looking forward to it. Hey, thank you so much for your time, and we love you guys and your music, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, brother. God bless you. Say hey to your daughter for me, and you have a great day.
All right, thanks, you too. Thanks, buddy.
See you, man. Bye.